Welcome to The Wealthy Healthy, the podcast and blog dedicated to inspiring better mental, physical, and financial health. I'm your host, Ricky Newton, and today's Financial Fridays episode is essentially going to be a summary and exploration of the 1996 book, The Millionaire Next Door, by Thomas J. Stanley and William D. Danko. I should preface this entire episode with the following. This is one of the most popular finance books in the world, and it's been explained and summarized and written about many times before this. So if you've already read the book, this may not be a particularly valuable episode for you, unless you're interested in just hearing essentially a summary and a bit of an analysis of the concepts already explained really well in the book. This episode is primarily for people who have not read this book yet, or maybe not in a long time, to help everyone understand how self-made, first-generation rich people made their fortunes the slow and steady way. The Millionaire Next Door is the first finance book that I read. It was kind of the gateway drug, so to speak, to my own interest in financial independence and early retirement and just retirement in general and effortful saving and spending in general. Since first discovering the book 3 months into working full-time after graduating, I've read or listened to many of the more popular finance books, and I still find this one special enough to revisit every so often. What makes the book unique is that it features a lifetime of research, often in the form of longitudinal studies by the writers. The concept is that Stanley and Danko are looking at the profile of a self-made, first-generation rich individual. And what does that person look like? What are those behaviors? What professions characterize those individuals who managed to generate a net worth in excess of $1 million? Hence, the concept of a millionaire next door, somebody who looks just like any other neighbor on any other street, but actually has a very high net worth. One of the primary ideas explored in the book revolves around what the authors refer to as UAWs and PAWs, or underaccumulators of wealth and prodigious accumulators of wealth. They developed a pretty straightforward formula to determine these designations, which I'm not going to outline here, but it shouldn't be very hard for you to find it online if you would like to run your own numbers against it. As a fair warning, it's a little difficult to get a good read if you're on the younger side, I would say like younger than 30 or so, or if you've really recently had a big raise. The formula doesn't totally work for those situations, but nonetheless, it's still good, something that you can take a look at. And suffice to say though, an underaccumulator of wealth is somebody with a low net worth relative to their income and age. So you could be 50 years old with $1.1 million saved, but your income is $500,000 a year. So you would still be considered a UAW. By their calculation, you should have saved quite a bit more than what you have saved. Prodigious accumulators of wealth, on the other hand, are essentially the opposite. They have a high net worth relative to their age and income. In a majority of cases, particularly with individuals over the age of around 40 or 50, this equates to having a net worth in excess of $1 million. It's worth noting that net worth, in this case, is looking at assets, investments, and savings, excluding debt and not counting depreciating material liabilities such as cars and watches. So, taking these two concepts into consideration, what did Stanley and Danko find? Most first-generation rich millionaires, of course, had what they called dull normal jobs. Many of them were business owners working in scrap metal, laundromats, engine repair, janitorial services, and so on. And as you might expect, given that list of professions, the typical millionaire actually looks nothing like what one typically would expect based on what we see in the media of athletes and celebrities living this extravagant, high-consumption lifestyle. But maybe the biggest point made in this entire book is that those who build wealth are almost always frugal. Frugality is at the core of the approach taken by nearly every single rich person or family that they surveyed. If one plays great financial offense, that is, they have worked hard enough to get into a position of earning a very high income, but also plays poor financial defense, meaning that they don't do anything to save or protect that wealth, then they are destined to live paycheck to paycheck and struggle to ever retire from their jobs due to the sheer cost of their high consumption lifestyle. In living such a high cost lifestyle, even someone with $200,000 saved might not even last a year without working to earn a paycheck. So, What does the average American millionaire actually look like then? A typical millionaire does not dress in fancy clothes or drive fancy cars or wear fancy jewelry. In stark contrast, a significant majority of millionaires drive practical American cars that they often buy used. Most of them have never spent more than $400 on a suit, never spent more than $500 on a watch, and never spent more than $300 on a pair of shoes. So, who did they find keeps the luxury car, clothes, and accessories industries alive? Well, it's people with incomes in the $50,000 to $200,000 a year range who spend nearly every single dollar that they make. These underaccumulators of wealth, these UAWs, are earning to spend. The authors quote one of the millionaires that they spoke to in their research, which is this middle-aged Texan guy. He's a business owner, and he looks so unassuming to the authors and the people that are involved in this book that he was actually originally mistaken for one of the truck drivers at this business rather than the business owner himself. He references the idiom, big hat, no cattle, to describe the typical high-consumption citizen. Of himself, this Texan millionaire says, "I don't own any big hats, but I have a lot of cattle." And of course, this ties directly in with what I mentioned before as a primary finding of Stanley and Danko's research. A vast majority of millionaires do not own big hats. Prodigious accumulators of wealth rarely purchase new or luxury cars. In fact, UAWs spend more time researching the purchases of new cars than they do researching appreciating investments like 401ks and IRAs. Unsurprisingly, these prodigious accumulators, the PAWs, are by comparison spending several hours more per month on average researching ways to reliably and passively turn their money into more money. On average, a UAW works on deliberate financial planning about 4.6 hours a month, while the typical PAW works on their budgets and investments about twice as many hours per month. The book also highlights an example I liked, in which a UAW they spoke with shared that his parents were also lifelong UAWs, and one of their vices was to smoke cigarettes at a rate of 3 packs per day over the course of 46 years. This equated in raw costs to tens of thousands of dollars, which, had they instead, at the beginning of that 46 years, invested that lump sum into a cigarette company, the same company that they smoked, over the course of 46 years, that money spent on cigarette packs would have been worth over $2 million at the time of their retirement. So by contrast, these individuals were really not able to comfortably retire at all. They had to keep working and earning in some way to support their lifestyles. But had they just invested that, instead of spending it on 3 packs a day of cigarettes, that $2 million would have been their retirement. These are the types of expensive choices that UAWs tend to make. A small expense like a pack of cigarettes here or there, or eating out frequently, that can add up over the course of many years to life-changing sums of money had those sums instead been invested properly. You can probably figure out this math for yourself. I mean, if you think about $6 a day on a Starbucks coffee or something like that. In the short term, of course, that's not an expense that you're really thinking about. But if you really do the math, add that up over the course of 10 or 20 years and include appreciation, include the fact that every 10 years, that investment amount should double. If it's, staying static in investments, then $6 a day on coffee for 10 or 20 years, that's a new car. Just do the math yourself if you are, especially if you're the kind of person who tends to spend on something like that every day. Now, the authors of this book also make an interesting point. They note that many people look at individuals who have accumulated a lot of wealth and think, why does he or she continue to save and live frugally? They're already rich. They don't need to keep saving. The response from the authors is an analogy. The people you see jogging every day are already fit, and they look just like the type of people who don't need to jog at all. But it's because they are out there jogging every day that they are fit. Wealth accumulation works in the same way. These individuals are wealthy because they are living frugally and saving diligently every day of the year. Under this thought process of this next door millionaire type of approach to wealth building, the strategy, of course, would be that this is a marathon. It's not a race, it's a marathon. In addition to failing to live frugally, UAWs are also more likely to directly or indirectly teach their kids the same exact habits and thereby doom their children to a lifetime of credit card debt, earning to spend, and living paycheck to paycheck, despite what often looks like the appearance of wealth in the form of large homes and luxury vehicles. But this trap is relatively simple to avoid. So if you fear that you're in this boat, or you could end up in this boat, or you're putting your kids in this boat, listen to episode 6 of the podcast entitled How Lifestyle Creep is Ruining Your Financial Health. On that episode, I go into more detail, but the basic idea is that by budgeting and paying yourself first, you can better understand your spending, identify areas to cut back, and of course, by automatically paying yourself, create an environment of relative scarcity, learn how to live on that amount, and of course, then save more. In any case, it's important to note that among all of these examples, I'm of course simplifying a lot of these findings. In the book, the authors do a better job of addressing common rebuttals and criticisms than what I've looked at so far here. That being said, I do want to address a few of those right now, including some areas that I don't feel were deeply touched on in the book. So look, you might try to argue, I think this would be a common argument against this is, hey, Ricky, isn't this a terrible way to live? To surrender the now for the future? What if you die tomorrow? Then it's all a waste. You even said yourself in an earlier episode on a Motivational Monday that all you have is right now, and I agree with that. That's how I live. So yeah, look, there's some decent points in that. Yeah, if you die tomorrow, in a sense, your efforts are wasted, assuming, of course, you're not leaving something behind for your family. In that case, certainly not a waste, but I don't see any of this as an argument in favor of totally depriving yourself. I've mentioned in previous episodes as well that at the end of the day, money is in part meant to be used. And one of the better things that you can use it on is experiences and entertainment like small vacations and concerts and fulfilling social events. So I'm not saying, and neither is the millionaire next door saying, that you should completely forego enjoyment of today for promises of a better tomorrow. Financial independence and freedom from the requirement of working may be its own reward in itself. And Stanley and Danko do mention in a few of their case studies that many self-made millionaires put in the time to budget and track their spending, and they cut coupons even though they're already millionaires because they recognize and enjoy the freedom of that excellent financial health that they've given themselves. So even if your argument is that you love your job and you never want to retire, let me ask you this. Do you love the feeling of struggling with bills? Will you love having to borrow from friends and family to make ends meet in the event that you become ill or get injured, or you just age to the point of struggling to do your work in a safe and effective manner? Or maybe you live somewhere like the Silicon Valley like I do, and you age to the point where there's going to be some discrimination against you. It's going to be hard for you to continue to find work unless the work that you're able to do is very, very niche, very differentiated. That's a reality, is that it gets harder to get hired as you get older. Maybe, here's another question for you. Maybe you love to work consistently through the year and never travel the world because the ones and zeros in your bank account don't let you. Maybe you enjoy that feeling. Or maybe you love when your car needs a repair and you can't afford it right away. So you just avoid using your car for weekend trips, and instead you miss out on opportunities to experience fun activities with friends and family. Obviously, all of these questions are totally loaded questions. Nobody actually loves any of those things, but hopefully I've illustrated my point. There is always, always, always a value in planning for tomorrow, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to sacrifice today for it. Here's one way to think about it. Let's say you're 22 and you decide you'd like to enjoy the next 30 years of your life to 100% capacity, and you're willing to enjoy the following 30 years to nearly 0% capacity. So you'd rather, at about 52 years old, just kind of the rest of your life is horrible, basically. Maybe that's the way that you want to live. Or, alternatively, you could enjoy now to 60% capacity so that you're more able to enjoy the future to 90 or 100% capacity. If you go in that latter case, your average quality of life and your total enjoyment is higher than in the first example. Of course, these are just kind of made up numbers, but I think there's some value to thinking about things in that way from time to time. Now, another potential argument against this is, why would I want to take the slow lane? Wouldn't it be better to earn a much, much higher income, or to earn a lot at once, and then from there I could just do whatever I want? There's actually something to that. Of course, much, much easier said than done. Yeah, if you have a relatively low income, one of the best things you can do for yourself is to actually take the necessary steps to work toward increasing that income. That's a great way to improve your financial health. But if you want to earn a giant lump sum and sell out, retire early, live life like a reality show millionaire, and still have a smart amount of savings to spare. That's actually something you can do. And some people do that. I actually, I live and work in the Silicon Valley, like I just mentioned before, where stories like this aren't even particularly unique. There's a ton of tech CEOs and executives who turn just an idea into big money in a relatively short amount of time. The company I was just at was actually just acquired 2 weeks ago from the time of this recording for $540 million. The CEO, this is all public information because it's a public company. The CEO he could liquidate all of his stock for somewhere around $35 million. And he's been at this for 7 years. He's in his 30s, has a wife and 2 kids. So if he wanted to right now, he could actually, of course, he could sell that out, retire, and in his 30s, live this extravagant life, kind of do whatever he wants, drive whatever car he wants, take whatever vacations he wants, and he would probably not run that well dry. But again, of course, this is not an easy task, and it's also very far from a sure thing. But that all having been said, I actually will be tackling this idea in next month's episode of Financial Friday, when we take a look at a similar book that has a totally different spin on it, though. MJ DeMarco, he's written this book, The Millionaire Fastlane. It's essentially a criticism of the slow and steady approach to wealth building. So if you truly feel that this approach of frugal living and working hard to improve at your work and earn promotions and obtain raises, to increase your income and contribute to a 401k, if that sounds entirely not for you, then be sure to tune in next month when we talk about fast lane concepts. And that episode after, I'll also talk about my own personal philosophy, the one that I'm trying to do as much of in my day-to-day life, which actually involves combining both approaches in what I call the next door fast laner. So this is kind of the first episode in a 3-part series talking about wealth building and looking at these books. So of course, today's was The Millionaire Next Door, the slow and steady frugal approach. Next month, we're going to look at the Millionaire Fast Lane. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. As always, feel free to share your thoughts, praise, criticism, whatever it is. Share all of it. It just serves to make the show better. And of course, as well, be sure to check out the blog and other content on thewealthyhealthy.co and subscribe to whichever medium you prefer.